First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this kind of webinar. I'm kind of new in these webinars, so it will be great to get your comments during my presentation. Then I can actually answer you in a much more deeper way. My background, I'm actually a toy designer. I started working I graduated from toy design, and then I started to work for Toys R Us, and then went to Billund to work for Lego for a short time in the concept design lab, and then moved to Hasbro and worked for in London. Worked as a in the incubation team in the concept design area as a futurist for about 7 years. So I was in the innovation environment. But the more important part is we used to look at different ways of innovating the whole culture. And I got extremely inspired from how children think. And then I decided to set my own Play to Innovate workshop consultancy company and start to work with completely different people. And some of them were amongst like leadership, some of them were trying to understand the organizational behaviors within the companies. And how teams can actually work with each other, and or service design, and some of them are actually recently I'm doing a lot of teaching on innovation and how we can actually use it in the corporate environment. So how does play really come in? So how does play actually come into the area is, for me, I have to actually start my presentation, is from the childhood. It's very important how we actually start to learn or everything, and we start to try to make meaning of our life is by observing and looking at everything. And in every of my speeches, I always talk about how actually people grow. We usually grow from inside and all the way to outside. So you can imagine, like, looking at your hands is always the first impression of what it really means you are trying to communicate within the world. And that's why it's really important to look at kids' mind before we even speak about the leadership, because leadership is actually starts within us. And you can imagine if you have children also, it's kind of like they really know how to lead other people, especially adults. They know how to communicate with them. They know how to actually tell exactly what they need, and they kind of create their own vision. And so, like, for example, you would first see how babies and parents actually interact with each other. So in a way, it's kind of like they are interacting and they're kind of telling them, communicating their needs. And they're observing and exploring. So I'm going to come to the leadership part, but I just want to understand from the perspective of the child within us doesn't really die. It actually grows with us. And we actually, this is kind of our blueprint of how we are understanding our environment. So you always observe and try to make sense of what's going on within your world. And you start to explore and you try to be hands-on with what's going on. So it's exactly the same like in your workplace. You try to be, the first day when you come, you try to make sense of how you can actually behave within that environment and what really it means to you. So you are trying, you smile to other people, and it's a contagious act. So once you smile to other people, they are going to be coming back to you, and they are going to be opening their own self to you. And you start to explore the environment, and you start to question things and try to make sense of what's going on really. And you start to experiment and also take risks. And I think, especially in leadership, these are the most important skills of to be able to take the risks and to be able to understand how you can actually make a team and get together and understand other people's motivations. And embrace the mistakes, of course. There's a new approach in the leadership, especially, and how we can actually create better cultures is to understand that not every leader or everyone is complete. We have to almost appreciate the incompleteness of ourselves. It's kind of like in design terms, we used to look at some of these interactions, and deliberate the incompleteness is a very important concept, that you actually try to create even the possible mistakes that's going to come out of it, that it's actually going to create a completely different interaction, and which is going to also give you the opportunity to challenge yourself, and not just yourself. You also need to challenge the other people. It's kind of like you pull yourself from out of your comfort zone and move into a much more almost ambiguity and uncertainty, which are actually, at the beginning it looks a bit scary, but you need to be able to make that kind of leap in order to start to make these kind of connections. And after that, you relate to other people. You are trying to tell your story and your vision and your dreams, that you can actually communicate and make them understand what it really means. And of course, in playful environments, you are in a situation that it might be vulnerable. You might end up being in extremely uncertain situations, or you might be really discovering something amazing which you have never ever looked at before. So it's kind of like you start to really see the things and really seeing them and testing them and experimenting them. So this is the part which is my inspiration to look from every situation from like a child's mind, because I think play for me is the outcome of manifestations of connections with ourselves first. So I look at play as a philosophical approach, more of not like a child's play, but as a play of making connections in order to create much more deeper meanings. So if something is more playful in the sense, you will be able to communicate, you will be able to actually interact with it in a completely different way. You are going to observe it, and you are going to start to actually try to feel what it really means. We call it really sensory way of understanding the whole situation. And I think for me, I'm going to take this play is ageless. Play doesn't have any kind of boundaries. And in the playful mind, especially when we look at it, or humorous mind, it's so ageless that you can actually communicate with different kind of generations. So what does it really tell us? Within the organization, for example, or within the working culture you are dealing with, or any kind of situation that you are in, you can actually find almost a common language that's going to tie in both of the generations or multiple generations. Especially today, in the complexity of our world, we are not going to be dealing only just our own kind of communities. We are dealing with completely complex communities. Especially if you are working for NGOs, for example, you will be coming across into conflictive situations. And playfulness or humor, those two things, they come hand in hand. They actually lighten up the whole stressful situation. They make the connection in a way timeless. It doesn't really get old. It becomes so much more emotional. And for example, in the primal leadership of Daniel Goleman, when he talks about emotional intelligence, one thing which is extremely contagious is it's the laughter, it's the humor, it's the time which is becoming more positive attitude rather than the part which becomes more negative. Usually people are more open. It's kind of like if you imagine you are like a sponge, you become more open to the positivity and the easiness of this of the relationship and the emotions, rather than extremely if it is sharp. So you can almost soften the situation. That's why playfulness is extremely important. And one thing that is not, that you shouldn't be forgetting, is it is a voluntary act. You cannot really force anyone to go inside a playful atmosphere. But you need to almost, it's kind of like in being in a very soft, silver line in a way. It's kind of like you can't really push the person, but you can almost create the circumstances. You can almost provide some of these things. For example, if you are in the office, if you're at home, you can create some kind of fun elements within the environment that is going to start to have a conversation even, or something to look at which is going to make it much more, give you some kind of a fun feeling inside you. It doesn't have to be some kind of a really toy, even just a colorful thing or even a flower. Those are the things that's going to actually start to draw some kind of emotion in the mind of the eye, basically. And once you are in a more comfortable zone, once you actually make other people comfortable, you are actually starting to give them a safe environment. That's what actually the blueprint of play does. It actually creates the environment. It softens the safety nets that you don't have to protect yourself with extreme, but you can actually start to open yourself. Then you can actually start to move one step further. You can actually start to take the risk to explore and to experiment, because those are the things that comes in hand. If you are not comfortable, if you don't feel safe, then you are never going to actually try to say, I'm going to challenge myself. You are always going to be happy being in that comfortable place. But if you stay there, you will never be able to make that magic happening. Or you are not going to be able to give the opportunity to other people to make that kind of magical thing to happen. You really need to almost provide that welcomeness within the environment. And how does the playful mind really working? Is kind of like you are collecting millions of different information around yourself. You are actually gathering so much variety of things, and without you know it, even when a glimpse of kind of a nice shiny thing is going to stick in your mind. Maybe you will forget about it, but it's going to be there in some way. So they are all kind of creating a pattern for you. The pattern that's kind of, it's kind of like a lace. A lace in your mind is kind of being created, and in certain situations, they are going to be all light up, which is going to bring you the information that you need. And when we look at if you look at the ancient times, why the Greek theater was in the first time created was really to understand other people's opinions and to actually kind of make fun of the situation or role play it so that they can actually really understand it. So that was the core of the first really serious debates were happening. So you might think that the playfulness and all these like a light kind of feeling situation is not that serious, but it's actually extremely serious when you are thinking that the most important thoughts were actually provided during these times. And as Plato always says, it's like you can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation, which is extremely true, especially if you put all these people in one table and ask them to play. Their instinctive behavior really comes out because they are so safe in that place that they can actually act in the right way and in the way they would do it in that kind of a situation. And the other thing you can imagine is like you start to pinpoint those people who are the leaders in that place, the people who are motivating the situation or pulling the most important emotions. And that's the catalyst. The leaders are actually the catalyst of the situations. And these kind of people can actually bring in the culture and play, kind of actually playfulness is actually creating the cultures, which is like if you have some kind of way of speaking within each other within the team, for example, or a joke or some kind of humorous state, that's going to become a ritual. For example, being at the coffee table and talking and laughing, that's going to stick, and all those decisions that is going to be made during that time are going to be much more sticking to your knowledge than you would be actually sitting and watching one presentation. So that kind of playfulness and easiness is actually sticks with the cultures, because it's also the way the people are going to behave and act out in their natural way. And when they are natural, they are much more open. And then when they are more open, they are more connected. And once they are connected, they are actually going to take more empowerment, and they are going to feel empowered, and they are going to be willing to give you back. We have seen these kind of things in especially in Turkey. Some of these images are going to be from Turkey during the Gezi Park situations, and so you can see how people got connected with each other because of their own belief and positive way attitude towards the situations. And these are they created a culture. They created a strong culture that everybody was united, even children. And we can see it in the cities when you start to, put the color in, or some kind of a playfulness in the environment. People start to see these places much more their own, and they can, they are going to, take care of it so much more. And we see this kind of behavior, especially animals as well, like polar bears and huskies. This is a BBC documentary, and the story goes is basically there were like huskies in the Alaska, and the polar bear was just passing by and almost going to fight with the huskies. And once the huskies started to, wave their tail, they became much more playful in their approach, and they were opening to each other. They were much more playful with each other, and it became a ritual. They started to come in and out almost like every year, and so the whole, terrifying situation actually broke down, and they became friends with each other. So why are we saying this? Like I like this word, is that the most wasted of all day is one without a laughter, because it saves the day. Even though if the day is extremely horrific day, if you can actually almost smile, that's going to definitely bring in so much positivity to your own self. And even again, when we look at those environments, which are kind of giving you a glimpse of some kind of a freshness into your eye, and sometimes humorous ways of doing it. And being involved in these kind of places, and with the community, of course. And when we look at all these things from the creative leader, in the journey of the leader is all about sensing and envisioning its environment, its sources. And what do we mean is, you as a leader, whatever you are doing, you are always going to be a leader. So you need to be aware of your unexpected events, disharmonies, processes, the change of the industry, the structure, whatever is going on, and the demographics, the moods, the perception of others, the new knowledge which is coming in. This is kind of your battlefield, let's say. You are really trying to understand exactly what is going on. You need to almost feel it and sense it. For example, for my case, is if I'm talking about play, I need to understand exactly who else is doing these kind of playful things. What are they doing? What else is coming in? Is the, for example, one of the biggest trends is well-being. So what else is coming in? Is the education, for example. Is it for children? Is it for adults? So I need to understand all aspects of my subject. Or if you are a mom, you need to understand all subjects of your child. Or if you are just stepping in your first job, you need to understand exactly who else is in this kind of area, what kind of things you want to do, and why are you approaching towards certain things. And then this is very much a design way of thinking. And after you do this sensing part, you go into relating. What does it mean? In the relating part, you are actually kind of connecting with the people. So if this was a movie, you are connecting with the actors of that movie. Who else is doing it? what are they doing it, and what is the relationship. So you are creating that, developing those relationships with the people. And you need to understand those people also. How can they actually add something towards you, and what you can actually give to them? And then next step is, after you have done all of this, it's your vision, and you are creating the vision. So almost you are kind of like developing visual vision, let's say. And the next part is inventing. So let's look at this. That's me in the middle. I'm trying to understand my environment, like the child trying to understand his environment. And then I'm relating. And for the child, it can kind of like your dad, your friends, the peers, the siblings, the guy across the street, or if it's your work, your colleagues, the vendors that you work with, the people that you want to collaborate with. So all these people are going to create some kind of a meaning for yourselves. So you are relating to them, you are trying to understand them. And if it's your consumer, you are trying to make sense what their needs are. And then you go into the action. And what we call the purposeful collaborated vision is you are actually not just like a hierarchical leader. You are kind of a connected, collaborated leader. You are now becoming all together, creating a vision for the future. And how I do it, it's kind of like if you have actually paper and pen, you can also create. I would then ask you three of your attributions and think about what you think is really valuable for you in yourself. And then almost create out of paper or anything that's around you some kind of a symbolic characterization, how actually it's becoming the person you are. Here you will see this was with one of the company which I was working for. Actually, I did a play to innovate workshop, and this is the symbolic character of they see who they are. And the description is they are kind of like a metaphoric thinking, is they are going for a war and they have their own I forgot the name. Their own swords, and they need always their own hat, and these are the soldiers that they actually kind of killed along the way. A shield, yes, thank you. and and they have a horse. I don't know what it means, but they kind of have a horse, which is kind of their own way of collecting themselves from one place to another one. And so you can imagine, this is a very metaphoric way of looking at your own life. It can be even done within your own corporation. It can be done if you are at the really beginning of your life, of career life. You can almost imagine yourself complete different metaphoric way and look at those companies that you are trying to get into, maybe huge big castles, I don't know, but you can name them, and then those kind of symbolic way of understanding what it really means. And as a leader of your own journey, how are you going to actually encounter those things? How are you going to try to find your way of in the way you would do it? So it's really important to create that vision. And vision without an action is merely a dream. And we call dreams as nice, but it's not in action. And action without vision is, unfortunately, just passes the time. And vision with action can change the world. So you always do have that kind of power in yourself. Everybody has the same kind of power that they can actually create their own vision and their action. So, but I would like to kind of touch into the archetypes. What does this mean? It's like if we are talking about the leadership, I would like to also talk about the archetypal personas and how they actually affect the way we do things. Archetypes are basically Jung's way of Carl Jung's way of describing the essence of yourself, let's say. And we usually use it in the branding. It becomes the essence of the brands. And we can divide them into four main areas: the freedom, the ego, order, and social. And within them, there are sub ways of looking at the archetypal behaviors. So it's kind of in the ego, let's say it's the explorer, the creator, the hero, and the magician. You can imagine the explorer is going to be someone who is wondering what's going to happen and how they can actually go and find a way of solving it. The creator is the one which is going to be like Lego, for example, or like somebody who is very much into a creative way of thinking, and they are always going to do their things, and their values are going to be around that creativity. The hero is always going to be kind of saying that, like the just previous character, I think he's a, I think I painted him too much, but anyway, he's a hero and he's kind of trying to find his own journey along the way. Um, and the magician is kind of going to surprise you always. They are going to be almost tickling your mind. And the sage, he's kind of like Yoda. He's going to give you a really important way of saying things. It's basically, you can see this is kind of becoming your way of speaking, the way you are, your values. And you can imagine tonight, if you want, what are your real values? What are those three important words that you will use for yourself? And how that kind of character within the, let's say, if you were going to create your own movie, how would you actually walk? How would you actually go and talk to the people around you? What are you going to say to them? So it's the same. The ruler is going to be much more, you can imagine they are going to have a much more bold way of saying things. Innocent will be much more friendly and they are going to try to be nice to you. And regular is going to be talking more daily things and much more normal stuff. In branding, we would say regular is more like IKEA, for example. You would see it in everybody's house. And and the caregiver will take care of your situation. They are going to help you and they are going to always comfort you. The lover, you can imagine, is kind of flirtatious, kind of like a always takes you into the magical worlds of yourself. And the jester is going to make you question things. They are going to really kind of play around, I would say. They are very interesting. They are going to make you wow. So in that kind of an example is like Cirque du Soleil, if you have ever seen it, is always makes you like wonder how it happened really. And the outlaw is kind of going to be taking the risks. They are going to show completely different way of looking at certain things. So this is more of like personality, and you can see it's kind of like a creative way of kind of finding out how you would be behaving within the organization and or in your life also. But although we use this for the brands and we call this in the brands, when you call the archetypes, they don't change anything. They will always stay true for this kind of reality, their characteristics. In maybe in for yourself, it might be the stages of life. So it can change in some time. You might become the hero at some point, and then you might change and become more like a sage kind of a role. And I would like to show you some of my more play to innovate workshops and how we use it for to define people's situations and the understanding, for example, into understanding the needs of the consumers and defining different experiences. These are very much like a random objects and materials, but every object and material has a different way of speaking itself. It has a different function, but metaphorically speaking, they symbolize completely differently. And you can imagine when you are trying to understand the environment of a leader or environment of the employees, you don't really ask them the straight question. You ask them actually how they feel and what is it they are almost envisioning? What is their way of describing certain situations? So this is more like a three-dimensional way of creating their atmosphere so that they can actually give you the exact answers that they are really feeling and sensing. Um, and it's really important to be almost open, open-minded and free in creating certain stories. One of them is actually from the Bubble It on the right side. We created these kind of like characters and defining ourselves, but it was very, very imaginary and very actually creative, I would say. Um, it was very deep in the way people were creating their meaning. On the left-hand side, it's a very sensory play. It's random, but I always see people becoming very much attached to these kind of like no mission-related playfulness, and they start to laugh and they start to come closer to each other. They speak much more openly. They become much more comfortable in their own skin, let's say, and they become they become actually open to any kind of solutions and more creative. This is from another workshop. Again, there is no end result is expected, but it was full of excitement with using completely different materials so that they can actually go into a more imaginary world. Um, and this is again, they are trying to understand a fantasy world, and in fantasy worlds, actually, it's quite interesting how you can exaggerate situations. Once you can start, you can actually extend your mind. You can actually start to see completely different perspective of the whole situation. But the reflection part of it would be very, very important. Another one, which is we have done it with very young group of people. And this is another one which is kind of understanding dynamics of the teams and how they are actually creating their own meaning within themselves and how they are defining it. And what are they really talking about? Are they really closed groups or are they open groups? And how are they relating to each other? Here you can start to see exactly what is missing. And that's the part which is actually really important to understand is the missing piece and how you can actually recreate that missing piece. So these are my slides, but I would love to get your questions now and so that we can talk more in depth and I can answer your questions. So the question is, what is your most astonishing experiences in building teams via play? Can be in different contexts from students to businesses. Yes, definitely. You have to always change the audience is always changing. Um, my actually recent, so I started to teach about innovation and how we can actually use it. So the group that I was working with, I wasn't expecting them to at all um, because of demographics, I would say, and because of the context. And I was more talking about the organizational innovation, and I wasn't expecting people to play, and they were in the age between of 40 to 50, and I did make play some of these people, but it was just so amazing for me to see that they start to go through my boxes of toys and took them and they start to build things and they start to actually talk about it. Usually I would give it to the people, but in that context it wasn't the case and I was supposed to be just purely lecturing. But I was very much happy to see people were smiling and they were actually opened a lot of important questions and tried to solve some of them with each other. The other one was, unfortunately, I can't really mention the name of the company, but this structure was actually understanding one of the product design problem, and it was a macro exaggeration of uh, one of the technical problem within their own product, and they abstractly talked about it in a way that I think they found amazing detailed solutions, and that's an engineering problem. So they actually figured it out. And with students, you mean young students or older students, like age group? Do you have anything in your mind, I found?
Nothing particular. I just know that you have wide ranging of experience in different groups, so it is just to mention.
Okay. I think more than, well, there's always a different demographic is playing completely different ways. So young kids, they need more structure, I would say. You need to give them much more clear direction, and you need to understand that you can't really leave them any like a white space, like a white paper. So what I mean is, once I've done I put myself in a troubled situation, is I asked the kids to create out of the candies some kind of amazing present to one of their character, and they were looking at my face like, what am I asking? So the next time I actually gave them a much more directive and much more structured question, rather than giving them open-ended. And again, it depends. Some cultures, some companies, if they are extremely, so if I go to the corporate life, for example, some of the cultures, they are so inventive and they are so imaginative. I don't need to give them anything. It's almost like I shouldn't give them anything. And they just take anything and they create and they start to question things and make things out of it. So it changes always.
May I say something? Like I have one comment from my personal my personal perspective. Okay, I see this is a quite vital element of how to say every personality, like this ability to engage in a play, and somehow I see it quite utilized in the corporations, in very organized systems and so on. But at the same time, I feel somehow there's a terrible lack of seriously non-serious play in everyday life, and somehow I immediately think about ways to democratize the access play.
Really, oh, sorry. I think, well, in organizations, you are right. It's very much closed places. You can almost create it in around your desk area, I would say, or sometimes some of the companies give you the power to play around the cafe, coffee place that you can actually take it. We used to put actually posters around our areas so that we can actually communicate, put some kind of funny posters that people laugh, or celebrating somebody else's birthday. So that's one type of, you can create it. You can put maybe actually I can show you story cubes. I don't know if you've ever seen it. This one, a really good tool, just to enjoy 2 seconds every day. Look at these kind of like images and make up stories. Simple as that. And you can have an app of it. So these kind of things are actually bringing you in some kind of imagination. Even I have these cups close to my desk. These are like Nespresso cups. I sometimes play and build towers with them. I mean, it's nothing, it's nothing crazy of, trying to really pushing myself, but just simple stuff is actually helping you to inspire yourself. I would say, or even the place that you are sitting, closer to wherever you are sitting. If you can manage to sit next to the window, for example, that kind of gives you some imagination. The other thing is, you can create a game for yourself. For example, every day, if you have a way of going to a station or somewhere, maybe you are once in a while changing your direction, and make it more playful instead of you are always doing it exact the same way. These small tweaks are going to kind of give you a little bit freshness. The other thing is, this is recently what I've been doing, and you are welcome to try it, is I booked myself from 11 p.m. till 12 at night as my daydreaming time. Although I'm not doing it every day maybe, but I kind of know it's my time to imagine and kind of come up with stories, and it's kind of like giving permission to yourself, I would say. I hope this kind of answered. Can I read the first question? During team building process, have you developed any tools to tackle the fear of exposure or intimacy, or balance the different levels of engagement in the team? Yes, I have. That's exactly the reason I'm actually starting to make these kind of characters. I call them avatars. This, in the beginning of my presentation, the character you see, actually, let me take you all the way there. This character is actually done by one of my participants, and I love it. It's just so cute for me. That's why I'm using it. But this kind of helps me when I ask people to create their own avatar, for example. It's fun. It's a bit hard. You need to be really soft with the people, but it's kind of like a fear of exposure kind of eliminates. But even before that, you can actually use, there is one you can use is circle. You create a whole A4 paper and then put all these kind of circles. You can ask to draw a bunch of circles, and then ask them to draw anything they want. And you will need to tell them that it's fine to draw whatever, and it needs to be silly, and it needs to be funny, and it's nothing wrong with it. Once you create that kind of a level of interaction that it's okay, people start to become much more open to expose themselves. I hope this answers, but you need to do it really slowly and kind of don't push people, but make it really softly and nicely, and say almost, I went through the same thing. It may not be easy in the beginning, but it's okay. Okay.
Excuse me, it's me again. I have another comment. I mean, what you just said is really inspiring for me, because I have one example from the non-formal graphic art scene in Serbia. There was a guy who was always organizing a collective drawings. Like he collects a story. He creates. He puts the text on the pages, and he's carrying these white pages with the text with him everywhere.
Okay.
On the exhibition openings, parties, and so on. And he makes people draw this collective story, let's say 40 pages story. Each panel is drawn by another person, and he's deliberately asking people who never drew any comics, to draw. And I observed this transformation which happens with these people when they say like, no, I'm not drawing, I don't know how to draw, I never drew anything before. And then he gives them the drawing tools, and he says, yes, but that's what I need, just relax, you don't need to know how to draw, just draw. And when these people start drawing, they turn into a lions, after a while. Then they cannot stop, because they feel like, oh yes, it's possible. My greatest fear of not being competent is defeated now, and now the expression starts.
Yeah, No, I totally agree with you. And the other thing is kind of like it's good not to know, because you have an excuse not to be able to draw, which is perfect. I think it's harder if you do it with the designers, because then they can become a bit more competitive in that side. So I have one more question here from Istanbul. How can you measure the readiness in the people when it comes to playfulness? Is everyone on the same level of readiness when it comes to playing? I'll just answer this one. No, not everyone is the same. Some people are so much open, because maybe it's, especially, I would say, the people who likes to play with their children. Not I'm saying that everybody needs to be a mother or a father or anything like that, but just a very easy relationship to that is some of them are like, oh, I know how to play. So they go into that state of mind very quickly. I have seen a couple of people completely ignoring and don't want to be in the playfulness, because play is a vulnerable thing. You are very much opening yourself. You are actually kind of naked there in a way. But you don't usually say it in the beginning of the meeting, of course. And that is really, for some people, it's extremely scary. Considering professional relations, timing is very important, and there are always deadlines. Is there any time limit to measure the success of your team building efforts? Oi, that's a really good question. Yes, there are millions of deadlines, and I guess actually I'll say it from my own perspective. My success nowadays is like within the given time, how much I can make the best is really important. It doesn't mean that it's the best work I've been doing. It means like, what can you do the best within the given time? Almost make it into a gamify the situation, I would say, because I'm also playing with myself, saying that, okay, if I don't have that much time, I still need to be, I still need to see the success, which is like how much I pull together within that condensed time, let's say. But it's not always perfect. One time I was almost feeling seriously smoke was coming from my brain, I would say. The avatar tool, I sense affinities with drama practice as well. Math techniques, yes. Speaking theater. Speaking of theater, could you elaborate on your previous comment? Ancient Greek theater is mentioned here because of its architecture or social? Oh, they are both. They are both actually, because you know the ancient Greek theater was formed in that form in order to be, first of all, heard so well and to collect everyone within the within the city, so people could actually welcoming themselves and acting out, so that they can show their own drama. I mean, I'm not really a drama expert, but this is, I would say, architectural and social structure are all both went hand in hand together. Actually, I would say the social structure started first, architecture came afterwards.
Oh, here comes the strange sound. That's me turning on my microphone again.
Okay.
Well, basically for me it's really inspiring now. What happens in my mind after this seminar is I'm actually seeing. Oh, there's another question. Okay, I just finished this sentence and then we move on to the next. I actually see how how the things you speak about and the things you are doing are how to say, complementary to so many of our activities, and I think each person here can think about, okay, how this relates to my work, to my project, to my activities, and I think that's actually the greatest achievement of this talk is what happens after in our perception. Okay, please, let's move on to the next question.
I have another question. In business teams, there is usually a clear leader and a team. Yes. What about everyday situations or study and work groups, university context? where there is no clear frame, but at certain point there should be somebody taking that position. And usually there are the same people who feel more comfortable doing this. How to make other takes risk? Really good question. I'm an architect and I have been a lot in these unbalanced situations, and I would like to, although I try, to make the others lead. Okay, that's a really good question. Actually, I would suggest in that kind of a situation is because really right now some people are really naturally leaders. They probably have been doing this all the time, and it becomes easier for them to do, speak on behalf of others, especially if there are extra introverts within the group. It might become easier for them not to speak and just say whatever they are kind of putting into the to the situation, and they will give their own feedback silently, I would say. But you can almost probably empower them in a completely different way. Maybe actually dividing the roles and the roles of the project, and giving them some kind of giving them the responsibility to actually show it themselves, are going to kind of circulate the maybe leadership roles. The other thing is they need to see that they can actually do it. So which means if you don't take it, if you leave that space, somebody has to take that space. It's almost like deliberately you need to step back basically from the situation. Otherwise, you are always going to be there is going to be one person who is going to always lead it, especially in the study and work groups. That's so much easier for people. And I have to say, in the corporate world, you see exactly the same situation, although they all have the work, so it becomes much more important for them to show up, but still you would see people kind of becoming quiet. It's also, the other thing is maybe to understand why they are doing in that way and what is good about them and how you can actually bring it to their goodness and their power up front. The other thing you can do is actually creating like a fun, almost like a top trumps. It was a big thing as card game, but I wonder if you can actually almost create some kind of a profiling of everyone, not as a bad way, but as almost like comical and a good way of showing actually what type of a leader you are, or what type of things you would like to lead in that kind of situation, because leadership is very situational anyway. So it always changes hands. It's important to really sometimes make the other person, the whoever is always leading, to step back from the situation. You're welcome.
I can maybe just tell one thing from perspective of CIN.
Sure.
Usually we always organized games before, before the serious work starts on the meeting, on the project development sessions and so on, so that people who haven't met before, they express their first the first expression of themselves in front of other unknown people they are supposed to work with. If it's happening in the domain of game, it's much better, because they will get to know each other on this like safe ground for the beginning, so the work will not go into any risk later because this was not expressed. For example,
I totally agree with you. I do exactly the same way. I usually make people play, and then the most important work that's going to come, and that people need to question and make some kind of sense out of it. You need to almost develop slowly to that section, because some people really not comfortable, so you can't really assume that everybody's going to go in that same pace. So really, it's usually, that's why like a one-day workshop if you are doing it. half of the day is kind of preparing them to come to the real work, and so that they can actually put themselves.
So in this sense, for Mamika, I think it's really useful that you're the new member of CIN, but the agenda of our meeting in Belgrade, which you will attend, is built in the same way. So I think you can benefit a lot from analyzing it and observing the whole process once it starts.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, okay. Is there any more questions, comments? Please feel free to express whatever you are experiencing in your smart heads at the moment. I must say I'm super satisfied actually with the technical quality of this online event.
Oh no, I have to thank you actually. I wasn't. It's sometimes scary to do it in the silence, but you were really good. Thank you very much. Actually, very understanding, I would say.
Well, definitely, I think we should repeat this more often. We got this online platform. We purchased this for the whole year, I think, this profile. So whoever is interested to curate event is also very welcome. And I think it's best if we do it in early evening hours, 1 hour, 2 hours of presentation and talk, and it gets recorded, and later with the authorization of the lecturer, it gets shared with the other members, and yeah. I would say also thank you everyone for attending, and thanks Yesim especially for this very inspiring speech. I don't know exactly what will we do afterwards. Do we can we also share the presentation, or I will send you the sound, you check it, and if everything is okay, we can share it with members.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks everyone. This was a really well spent 1 hour and 41 minutes.
Yes. Good evening.
Well,
Good evening.
for sure we need to apply this, of course. I think. Thanks, Marta, for the suggestion. Thanks everyone, and yeah, see you soon at the next webinar, probably, I think.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hope to see you all one day somewhere.
Well, probably at some of the CIN activities in future, I hope.
Yes, thank you very much.